About to get schooled. All right. Welcome back to the coffee talks from HPE Discover here in Las Vegas. It is Wednesday, I believe. I kind of lose my days because it's Thursday at home, so here we are on Wednesday. Still plenty of festivities today and tomorrow as well for those watching in the live stream. We're joined for this session by the Aruba team and talking about the software-defined WAN, software-defined branch office that was talked about in the keynote. Kishore, Raman, and Mani, can you introduce yourselves briefly and tell us a little about the solution that we've heard the name of, but no details?
So, hello everyone, I'm Kishore Seshadri. I'm the general manager of the solutions team. The SD branch solution is one of the things that my team is working on. I'll let Mani and Ramanan introduce themselves before telling you what it is we've been doing.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Ramanan Subramanian. I lead the SD-WAN product management team.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mani Ganesan, part of the SD branch, SD-WAN product management team. Yeah.
So we don't have any slides for you. We just wanted to give you a, I'll give you a quick 2-minute overview of what it is we've been doing. So we started down this path about, it's almost 2 years now. And this is when the SD-WAN hype curve was just starting to climb. And we started having conversations with customers who are doing branch deployments, really typically large distributed enterprises. And in these conversations, customers kept coming back to saying, look, Aruba, you do policy-based routing, you do application fingerprinting, we have a device, a branch office controller in many of our locations. Is there any way you can just add SD-WAN as a capability to the existing product? And over the course of the last 2 years, we've probably talked to 150 to 200 customers. One of the three of us have been involved in those conversations. And we found that while SD-WAN was the icebreaker, was the conversation starter, the problems that customers tended to have were much broader than just the WAN piece. So these tended to fall into 3 categories. There was the WAN side problem, which is that the existing wide area network was designed to solve yesterday's problem of taking traffic from the branch back to a single centralized data center, sometimes in an active standby configuration. But what they were actually seeing was that with the adoption of either infrastructure as a service in public cloud or with shifting to SaaS, an increasing percentage of traffic from the branch was going directly to the internet. So they saw no point in backhauling this all the way to a central location only to trombone it back to the internet. So, and then there were other business-related issues such as cost and flexibility, time for changes, and so on. So these were the WAN set of problems. On the LAN side, it was what we found was very interesting. There were a completely different set of problems that made the branch hugely complex. So a very typical customer we talked to had 3,500 locations. These were fairly large stores. Each store had about 16 VLANs. Every new type of device got mapped to a new subnet, a new VLAN. So this customer was running out of private IP address spaces. The ACL entries on the, there were ACL entries on the switch, on the router, on the firewall. They had policy configured on the WAN op device. And the ACL entry on the Cisco was about, I think 5,000 entries. So small list. And we found it very interesting that they designed the network to adapt it to the network management software. It wasn't the other way around. So, you had to know which port something was going to plug into. You had to know what ACL was going to go on that port. You had to make sure that the prefix, the low order bits on the IP address were exactly the same across 3,600 stores. And first meeting, we thought this was pretty unusual. This seems strange that somebody would build a network like this. But over and over again, we found this to be a very consistent model of deployment. And then finally, there were the operational complexities. If you have 5 types of devices in a location, you need 5 different install procedures. You have deployment models, configuration models, monitoring, troubleshooting. And there's no correlation across these different types because you have 5 different management consoles. So there was just an enormous amount of complexity that went into the branch. So we set about to define a solution called the software-defined branch that while it solved the SD-WAN problem, while it delivered that capability, really gave you a single framework to apply security and policy for securing both east-west traffic inside the branch as well as north-south traffic from inside to outside the branch. And to do it in a simple way with an emphasis on simplicity in every aspect, from installation all the way to monitoring and troubleshooting, and find a way to configure policy centrally, enforce it in every other place, and do this in a very intuitive way. So that's sort of the essence of SD branch. Do you want to add anything to that?
The other trend that we saw is that while campuses had NAC enabled, they had NAC enabled solutions. Generally, branches uniformly we found did not have NAC enabled. They didn't have devices that are either NAC enabled or they didn't have a NAC enabled solutions. So pretty much anyone who had access to the physical cable or the port, they could get access to the network. And overall, there was a pent-up demand to be able to identify what's joining the network and to be able to set policy based on that identity. A little closer, okay. Based on that identity. So, repeatedly in conversations that we had, this came up again and again. And not just in a specific sector like a finance sector where there's a mandate in many cases to have NAC enabled for retail finance, but including in stores, in retail stores, retail facilities, healthcare, across all the verticals, we saw this to be a common trend.
Yeah, I would just add to what Kishore was alluding to, a single point of policy enforcement, which is what makes the SD branch solution very unique from what's available in the market today. Again, it is not a single management tool problem. That just solves a part of it. Let's say you can have a single management tool for your wireless LAN, and WAN. Yeah, you can solve half of it. The other problem is, do you really have to deploy the policies over and over again at different layers of the network, different points in the network, using different constructs? Typically, on a LAN side, it's VLAN, subnets, ACLs. On the router side, it's VRF. That's how you do segmentation. Just an example of a policy segmentation that answers the question of who can talk to who cannot talk to who. If we can actually do it in a single way, where you define the user roles and tunnel all the traffic from the LAN side, doesn't matter whether it's wireless LAN traffic or wired traffic, tunnel to a gateway, and then use all of the policies using user roles, whether it's a WAN policy, a security policy, a segmentation policy. That is what the architectural differentiation is, along with the single management tool, which is Aruba Central, which helps you manage all three types of devices in a branch.
So one of the advantages of having all of this come together in a single branch gateway is that your typical SD-WAN gateway has information about the state of the wide area network, right? They send probes up different paths. They understand what the loss, latency, jitter, and delay is across each of these uplinks. In addition, they can fingerprint the application, so they can map an application to a most suited path. But in addition to that, we know who the user is. We know what role they've been assigned. We know what type of device they're on, because we profile every device. We know the posture of the device. We know the location of the device. We just have an enormous amount of context with which to make a forwarding decision on. So that's what allows us to shape user experiences within the branch, right? And so it's security as well as user experience.
Yes, I think it is question time now. So we'll let loose Drew.
So how is, from a licensing perspective, so you get the device, you deploy it at the branch. Is it a single license, a central license to manage that device itself, and then behind that, if you deploy any switches or deploy any access points behind that, then those would be central licenses as well? Or is the license included for the branch router or the branch? What's it called? Branch gateway? Okay. Yeah. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, I'll take it. Okay. So we have a single license for the branch gateway. So the branch gateway is the 7000 series platforms that we have. And it varies in form factor from the 7005 all the way to 7030. So in terms of speeds and feeds, the 7005 is the smallest and 7030 is the largest in terms of bandwidth capacity. But we have a single flat license for all the 7000 series. So we don't We don't differentiate based on bandwidth. We don't have different license tiers based on bandwidth. We haven't done that. I know a lot of vendors have done that. And talking to a lot of customers, it became very clear that it was complex. People didn't like that. They felt like they were nickel and diming them. So we have a single flat license for the gateway. Along with that license, all the SD-WAN, foundational SD-WAN capabilities are enabled. So they don't need multiple licenses for, let's say, the firewall or any other web CC, URL filtering, the WAN functionality, the SD-WAN functionality. All of that is included within that single license. So it makes it very easy for them to consume it. In terms of the consumption model, it is offered on Central. So it is a subscription license. So it's a term license that they would buy for 1, 3, 5, or 7. And that only applies to the gateway. So if they buy access points or the switches, they have device management licenses for access points and switches. So there are different licenses for those devices. Yeah.
Okay, so but those are then managed by Central, not managed by the gateway.
They're not. So all the full infrastructure is managed by Aruba Central.
Okay.
So the switches, the access points, and the gateway, both the branch gateway as well as the head-end gateway, are all managed by Central.
Okay.
Right?
Now,
So the wireless, the wired policy, as well as the WAN policy, including the security policy, all configured and managed by Central.
okay, and is there an option for if you don't private version of Central? What's like a private cloud version of Central where if I just want to manage all of my branch office gateways without using the public cloud for Central, is there an option for that?
So Aruba Central is the public cloud instance. So that's, the customer signs up, gets a portal, and really that's what we are pursuing at this point in time for SD-WAN. We are in discussions in early stages about, if there's a way that we can offer a private stack for some specific opportunities, but it's still very early and nascent at this point in time. So at this point in time, we're comfortable sharing that it's a public instance and it's a public cloud infrastructure that is rather public portal that they would use to manage their full infrastructure.
So actually, to add to what Ramanan is saying, there are two ways to think of the private version. There's the private stack on-prem. Somebody wants us to run in their data center. That's not an offering we have today. But we do, for sufficiently large customers, we have delivered options where we deliver it on a VPC that's either dedicated to them or the customer owns the VPC. So we've done this with really large service provider partners.
I'm the only one that's going to ask questions. So can you go into a little bit more clarification on the SD-WAN side? What are you guys using on the back end? How does it work? How does it differentiate from other SD-WAN offerings that are out there?
Sure. Specific features, to think of SD-WAN, there are multiple layers there, all the way from how do you connect to different service providers. So we have support for 5 different uplinks. That's the first question customer asks. Hey, how many uplinks can you have from a WAN perspective? We have validated internally up to 5 uplinks. One of them could be LTE based on USB, where you can just plug in a dongle which can connect using 4G LTE options. So that's 5 uplink, that's the underlay layer. And all of the routing happens at the overlay layer. The first thing that you do is, doesn't matter what type of transport it is, whether it's MPLS or layer 2 VPLS, Metro E, or just broadband internet, we don't really care. We build IPsec tunnels. That kind of provides a consistent model for the overlay where you don't have to worry about, okay, I do BGP with provider A, I do EIGRP with provider B, OSPF with provider C. That solves the problem of having one single consistent overlay. And beyond that, once the routes are exchanged between the head-end gateways and the branch gateways, that just provides basic routing functionality. Then comes the advanced policies in terms of load balancing. Let's say you have multiple uplinks in a branch. The first thing is, how do you make sure all of the available bandwidth is utilized? Because you're paying for that. You'll have to make sure you're utilizing all of them together, not just using active standby. So building active-active layer in terms of load balancing. Every uplink in a branch is in active-active mode. Then comes the layer of dynamic path selection, taking it just one notch above. Hey, I don't want to do routing based on IP addresses, right? That's old style. I want to define routing policies based on application names, like SaaS applications or applications hosted in your data center. And then Aruba differentiation that we talked about is user roles. Like most of the SD-WAN vendors can do application fingerprinting. Beyond that, if you want to say, okay, it could be the same SAP application, but if it's a contractor accessing the application versus an employee, versus a guest or an executive, you can have different types of SLA profiles. Do you want to put them on a premium MPLS path? Maybe you do have an MPLS path. You're not going to get rid of all MPLS in the world, right? It's always going to be, most cases, it's going to be hybrid. When you have critical traffic, can you put it on a premium path? And then best effort traffic like browsing and so on, can you put it on a best effort path like internet? Those kind of policies. That comes on top of the overlay routing layer. So think of it as layered cake. You have the underlay layer, overlay, route exchange, load balancing, then comes DPS. And another aspect is dynamic path steering. What happens is you might be in the middle of a Skype call. Your MPLS provider might be having a bad day. They're losing packets, or there is high latency between that particular site. We figure that out using the traffic that's going on in the active link. And if you know that the backup link is performing better, they have a better SLA at this point in time. You don't have to lose that session. The same session is straight over to the backup link. So from end user perspective, there is no difference at all. And when the primary comes back up, you can choose to move the flows back to primary. Those are all the normal, the SD-WAN pieces. We do all of that. The second piece is cloud use cases. More and more customers are saying, hey, I am moving all of my applications to SaaS. At least most of my critical applications are SaaS these days. Can you optimize the performance for the branch users accessing SaaS applications? So what we're doing there is figuring out all the internet exit points to reach the branch. You may have a local internet exit where you could just split tunnel to SaaS. The other alternate could be going to a closest regional data center. You may have a private pipe to Office 365. Many of the service providers provide direct connection for SaaS vendors too. So if you want to leverage that, you can say, hey, my primary is local internet. For whatever reason, local ISP is having a bad day. Can you ensure you put me on the SD-WAN overlay, backhaul the traffic, and leverage the private connection available or the internet connection available at the data center? Those are different types of SD-WAN policies that are commonly asked for, and we deliver all of that. Did that kind of make sense, a layered approach? Yeah. Anything you wanted to add?
And all of that's included in that in the license.
Yes,
Okay,
all of that.
so
And there's more too, because the gateway is an integrated appliance, and Mani was talking about the SD-WAN portion of it. It comes with a stateful firewall. So layer 4 to layer 7 visibility is there. So there's a DPI engine embedded where it sees 3,000 applications, and includes URL, IP reputation, all the URL filtering functionality is inbuilt. So all of that, so the WAN pieces that Mani talked about, the security pieces, and there's a whole bunch of LAN pieces as well, because there's different form factors that we
bunch of
support.
other stuff.
All of that stuff is included in that single license.
And then
Yeah.
you mentioned there were 5 different uplink layers that you can have. Are all 5 included in the license, or does it scale?
All
where
5.
2, 3, 4.
All
Okay.
5.
It's just a matter of the capacity. It sounds like between the 7005 and the 7030.
Right. So the different
Ports.
there are different form factors. The different ports. 7005 has 4 ports, and it goes all the way up to 24 ports.
Oh, okay.
So for example, for smaller sites, they really like a branch in a box approach.
Yeah.
So they have a couple of APs. They have a single gateway, and it gives them all the wired connectivity they need as well.
And are those then those ports? I'm assuming are software definable. You can ports.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's no fixed ports. Like we don't have a designated WAN port. You can pretty much choose any port and say this is a WAN port or this is a LAN port, and that's how it goes. Yeah.
And they also have PoE, so you can power the APs from the 7024.
Cool.
Any other questions?
What about CBRS? I'm just kidding. When's Aruba going to announce CBRS support? That's what I want to know. But that's not the question for you guys.
At a high level, any comments on? Or did you have a question? Let's go to your question. Does it resonate? I know SD-WAN has been touted as a separate feature, separate product, separate industry. From Aruba perspective, it's part of overall feature set that we can offer for a branch. Kind of combining all the policy layer from the LAN side into the WAN side. Does it resonate with you guys? Is it useful? Yeah.
Useful? Yes. Is it any different than what we've had for the past 5 years? Not necessarily. I think that's the big struggle that everybody, whether it's Aruba, whether it's Cisco, whether whoever you talk to, it seems like this is just the next generation marketing bingo card that you're going to play on, that we're going to hit on a phrasing that we have today. It just seems like it's all the same components that we've had, and I'm trying to, literally I'm sitting here looking at the white paper, trying to wrap my head around what's new. What's the new evolution of the product that is inside of here that really pulls all this together? Because so much of it is still, okay, it's the 7000 series controllers that we've had for how long have we had those? I mean, I've got a bunch of the 7005s in my house. So I'm like, okay, cool. I could, I have enough 7005s. I could set up a full branch set up and see what it looks like. But yeah, one for each room. Hey, there you go, Keith. One branch for every room. So I'm looking at this and I'm just trying to figure out what exactly is the evolution in here that we're looking at, and is this just another, oh, we're going to rebrand something because it's the buzzword that CIOs like to hear because it's what's pushing things out there and it's what the marketing people are telling us that we should be interested in. What's the big new thing that is all about this announcement? Because it seems like you're trying to push something that's been there forever with a new name.
In some senses, you're right in that the components are not new. I think SD-WAN is very similar already across different vendors, and IAPs have been around for a long time, and we really don't care that much about the hardware. We can do 1.5 gig in a 7005, which is a tiny box, so the performance is more than adequate for the price point and the locations that it tends to go into. So we saw no sense in building a new box to go do that. I think where things become interesting is in two ways. One is in offering what we call a full stack solution, which is a single pane of glass for wired, wireless, and wide area, where you can actually do correlations across analytics that you find across these three different areas. And second is being able to configure policy in a very simple way. And I think we've given examples of this where you might assign a role of camera to a security camera, right? And frequently infected by malware. And you can configure a policy that just says cameras don't talk to point of sale devices, right? It's not ACL based. You're not hardwiring IP addresses. It's not attached to a port. Policy follows the user. So it becomes much, much simpler to enforce both east-west and north-south traffic security. The other difference we didn't go into is that we're using this capability called dynamic segmentation, which is we effectively turn an access switch into a wired AP, where we tunnel all traffic on a port all the way up to the gateway, and the gateway becomes the single point of policy enforcement and security enforcement. So I'd say the value prop is architectural rather than in any one component. So it's really a different way in which we've assembled these pieces.
In fact, that's how the same pitch that you gave is what I give to customers. Hey, this is brand new. Can I put it in production? I exactly mention what you say. IPsec have been there on Aruba forever. ClearPass is not new. The architectural element managed by Central, putting these pieces together as a single validated architecture is the new piece. Right.
Yeah, the last piece I'd add to it is when we started to look at, how do we add SD-WAN capabilities to Aruba? We looked at the different form factors which were available, and it became very apparent to us that the 7000, as it's built, really delivers on incredible performance for what it needs to do. So from the hardware side, I think Aruba had hit it right, hit it out of the park. I think really the differentiation is in software and architecture. So the software that we've added to add all the dynamicity for the WAN that Mani talked about, the ability to probe both on the underlay, do active probing both on the underlay and the overlay. And there are components that we've added to make it much better in terms of how we do the probing and how reliably we can get the data in terms of WAN performance. And then the ability to set that policy to the dynamic path selection policy on the gateway, right? So those are the new software components that we've added in terms of the WAN capabilities. So it's really the differentiation is in software, and the last piece is architectural in terms of combining all these policy pieces into this single device. So I think they were there. I would say they weren't completely tied together and unified, and that's the piece that we are focused on. And it's a journey, I'll tell you this. I mean, we have started the journey, and there's a lot of things that we're bringing to market, but we'll continue to enhance on that and evolve on that.
And I'll stick my neck out here. So once you do this from cloud, certain things become possible that look really, really interesting. So we have dynamic path selection where the admin configures an SLA and says, if the WAN link doesn't meet this criteria, I want to use a different one. But if you have 3,000 locations and you have 2 or 3 WAN links from multiple providers, how do you know what the right profile to configure? It's really, really hard to do. So in this 1.0 release, yes, our path selection is based on static config of a policy. But it's once you have the intelligence in the cloud and the visibility from the cloud, figuring out how to baseline this across all stores and say, for Southern California, this is the DPS policy that you need to configure, right? That becomes an option. Or I could tell you if you're a big Office 365 customer in Nevada, is Comcast a better choice or is AT&T a better choice for broadband? I can now do comparative analytics on how often DPS switches happen. So it completely changes the game in what kinds of visibility you have. So for us, in a sense, this is sort of price of admission, and I think the interesting things come from here on.
Yeah, I had another question. This is, you've been mentioning 3,000, 5,000. How far down, if you just have 2 or 3 branch offices, still applicable?
Yes.
And what if you don't have branch offices? Can we foresee seeing these feature sets on your heavier iron systems? I mean, is it going to move up the stack as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Right now, our focus is on the distributed enterprise market. So with the initial release, it's about branch offices, and that's why the whole concept of SD branch. That's where we see the most demand for technologies like SD-WAN, the unification, the simplification, the level of automation that is required for small teams to manage a wide distributed enterprise. So initial focus is retail, healthcare, and hospitality. Definitely we see it bleeding into K through 12 and some retail finance as well. But that's kind of what we're focusing on for the initial release. But you're absolutely right. As the solution evolves, as we add more capabilities, this will eventually bleed into the campus type environments as well, where you'll have a single pane of glass to manage your campus manage as well as your branch manage. I would say right now our focus is on the branch, but as the solution evolves, we'll get to the campus edge as well.
So if it is leveraging a lot of the existing components like Central and ClearPass and such, licensing, do you have a simplified SKU to make this basically be one-click order that says all these cloud components are going to be put together? Because I know at Atmosphere that was Kirti, and part of this big thing is that we're moving towards the cloud first to be able to have customer first and customer last and all about the experiences. This is something I see as I need one simple SKU that if I order this, all these dashboards magically get created and linked through all the APIs and everything so that I don't have to worry about it, because I can see, again, to Keith's point, is that one of the things that Meraki has been really successful in is the simplified use of branch deployments and being able to interlink everything together without too much complications. And I know from my past experiences of setting up Aruba Central, it doesn't necessarily always go exactly how, and I'm brutally honest, so I'll always give brutal feedback because that's the only way that we're going to get better, right? So in my past experience, it's been a little bit rough at times with Central. So is there that simplified one SKU that says, okay, this is going to be the Aruba, quote unquote, SD-WAN solution. All these components are what's going to be set up and created. Your accounts are going to be created on the various cloud platforms so that we're easily going to be able to deploy this as a professional services shop to our customers?
I think I kind of addressed it earlier for the question. There's only a single SKU that we have for SD-WAN. We have one SKU. It's one SKU that you apply across all your gateways. So there's not multiple SKUs. And that one SKU enables all the functionality that we've been talking about here. So we kind of kept it simple in terms of how we have the licensing structure for the gateways. We don't want to overcomplicate it with multiple tiers. So we just have a single SKU that once you enable it, all the SD-WAN, all the gateway functionality is enabled for you, right?
Is that so? But that SKU is added to Central, right?
That's right.
So I already have to have the working Central instance set up,
Correct.
and then the ClearPass component. I have to have a working ClearPass component. So this is where we're struggling.
You just made it additive, not subtractive.
Yeah. It's about, because licensing inside of Central for the longest time has been a real hot mess as well too, as to, okay, if I do this, is it a per AP device? Is this how do I apply this to get my Central web authentication to work through, or my web authentication to work through with a remote third party or ClearPass and everything? So this is where the confusion comes in. It's not hard to add that SKU in there, but it's hard to integrate and enable all those services pushed together. And this is, again, I go back to, is that the huge push from the top is cloud first, cloud first, cloud first. We want everything so that we don't have to have these boxes deployed or virtual machines deployed. We want everything in the cloud. well, why can't that be firing off, which is what everybody's talking about, programmability of networking? Why can't that turn up all those instances for me so I don't have to do all this work of getting through it? And from a professional services person, I'm saying that because I don't want to have to go through and scope all those hours to do that, because there's so many pitfalls of where things can disconnect. And if you guys are pushing and hosting the services, I want that automated. I want that easy button for this type of solution, because this is where we need that easy button.
So no, I think you're right. We still have our work cut out here. Central itself will be moving over the next few months to a foundation and advanced type of licensing model. There'll be no tokens. So we want to really make this very, very simple. 99% of the deployments will be a single foundation license with support included. So that gets simpler. But where we do have our work cut out is on the ClearPass side. So what we're seeing over the next year or so is ClearPass Guest is now being offered on, as a cloud guest offering in Central. And over time, we'll probably see auth and policy elements start to show up as cloud services also. So you don't have to have both the on-prem deployment and a cloud deployment. So I think we have our work cut out to simplify that connection between those two. No CBRS.
So, Blake, you just said CBRS. Blake, drink, yeah. So Blake has a whole bunch of these devices at his house. Can he upgrade all of them or use this as is it the same license to take the existing hardware that so many people have purchased and adapt it to this? Or is this a whole new thing that they have to purchase?
It's the same hardware, but we, being cloud software, we are doing a controlled introduction. So we are going through the initial set of customers, proof of concept trials, and production and deployment. We want to make sure that the initial rollout is successful for all the customers. So if you have a customer account, then we'll have to enable, being a cloud-delivered software, we can actually do this. We'll say we just enable SD-WAN capabilities for your account. So we can just do that. But the hardware is the same. You don't need to refresh the hardware. Once you get SD-WAN enabled, automatically the new firmware gets pushed down, right? And once that happens, and everything rolls out from there.
So it runs a different version of AOS, so it might have to go through a couple of reboots. So it might take 15 minutes to reimage itself.
So one of the things I see here is that you're just getting questions out of the two wireless guys and the networking guy in the room. Three wireless guys there. So we have a wider audience of IT data center professionals. Is there anything in here that we should be aware of integration into our wider view of the IT estate that the organization has that can help us to break down those walls between the wireless nerds and the other data center nerds?
Okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the segmentation use case we kept talking about. When we say segmentation today, it's completely treated as, it's a data center segmentation, what different vendors call as micro segmentation, but data center, macro segmentation. And then why do we have to treat that as a separate problem from a branch and wireless LAN perspective? Can we have that end-to-end story? Once you have a segment that says, okay, these are the set of users, they're allowed to use only these applications, those apps are sitting in the data center. We need to have a common policy framework to carry that segment. Doesn't matter what kind of format you want to use on the data center side, whether it's a VXLAN or VRF, how you are segmenting. We need to approach with a common policy approach all the way from the RF side at the branch to where the apps are hosted. That's something we're looking at as well. So it's a common IT problem, not just a branch or a Wi-Fi problem.
And a wider application management problem as well, because from the application management side needs to be driving all of the infrastructure underneath, that we need to see more integration between the tools that are used to manage the applications, the tools that are used to manage the data center infrastructure as well as the WAN infrastructure. So is there openness of the APIs? Like this is going to be achieved through open APIs rather than direct single vendor integrations. What's the story around the openness of integration with your tool set?
So all the APIs we have today are open and published, and in fact we have really large service provider customers who use Central without the UI at all. So they use it purely as an API-driven engine. So all of these are documented using Swagger APIs. The SD-WAN APIs are being fleshed out over the next month or two. But for managing IAPs, switches, all of that is available today.
And is there some integration between things like OneView, which is used on the server infrastructure side?
Not with OneView because we run on AWS, we run on public cloud, so we don't actually have access to physical server infra, but we are working with the service director team.
So how long before that happens, right? How long before Central and OneView, where you can use OneView to start taking peeks into the entire network?
Yeah,
It's a great
I would
question.
like a plugin for OneView that will talk to the APIs that are running on AWS. So it doesn't have to be go in the other direction
Yeah.
necessarily, although I'm sure the networks team would like more visibility on what's going on inside the virtualized side.
How do you get HPE and Aruba to be one?
If only they could.
If only they.
Most of the asks we've had to date are for service director, because these tend to happen at service provider scale. So service director is starting to talk to Central and have a common view of wide area and wireless. So we should certainly talk to the OneView team.
Yeah, because those integrations and the automations start at the largest scale service provider customers, but we absolutely see them sweeping through the enterprise organizations, and even the medium businesses are starting to talk about wanting to have more integration in the management tools. Have we exhausted the wireless guys' questions? Or have they just got more questions they have to do off camera in private with after applying some alcohol to the team? All right. Well, if we are running to the end of questions, we should release everybody and get those in private conversations going. I believe we will be returning at about 12:45 for talking shop over lunch. Is that correct? Yeah, we'll be back at 12:45. Tune in for us. Here we go. Adam Jacobs from Chef will be joining us for that conversation.